Most folks have been growing potatoes the hard way for years, and I don't say that to shame anybody. I did it the hard way myself. You wait on spring, you dig a long row, you fight clay, weeds, beetles, dry spells, wet spells, and then one evening the frost comes down the hollow and reminds you who's really in charge. But there's an old bucket trick we used around these mountains that can stretch your potato season so far it almost feels like cheating. Not quite year-round in every place, mind you. Nature don't like promises that big. But nearly all year if you pay attention to timing, shade, cold, and the way a potato wants to live. Now, when I say bucket potatoes, I'm not talking about just tossing a potato in a pail and hoping the Lord takes pity on it. That's how a lot of folks fail. They use the wrong bucket, fill it wrong, water it wrong, leave it in the wrong sun, and then they say, well, buckets don't work. Truth is, the bucket wasn't the problem. The bucket was trying to help. See, a bucket gives you something a garden row can't always give you. It gives you control. You can move it out of hard rain. You can pull it into warmth. You can hide it from frost. You can start earlier, keep going later, and plant in little batches so you're not harvesting every potato on the same afternoon. That right there is the whole secret hiding in plain sight. I reckon my granddad never would have called it a system. He just called it keeping potatoes coming. He'd have some in the ground, some in old feed tubs, some tucked near the south wall of the shed, and a few late ones sitting where the morning sun touched them, but the afternoon heat didn't cook them. Back then, folks didn't always have fancy words for microclimate or succession planting. They just noticed where the frost sat, where the sun lingered, and where a plant looked happy. And if you enjoy this kind of old mountain gardening talk, you're welcome to subscribe and sit with us a while. No big fuss about it. I just try to share what I've seen, what old folks taught me, and what still holds true when you put your hands in the soil. Now, the first thing folks get wrong is the bucket itself. A 5-gallon bucket can grow potatoes. Yes, it can. But it's not always the best choice if you want a strong harvest. I like something closer to 10 gallons when I can get it. A potato plant likes room below, not because it needs to stretch like a tree root, but because tubers need space to form without crowding each other into little marbles. If all you've got is 5-gallon buckets, don't throw them away. Use them. Just plant fewer seed pieces. One good seed potato piece in a 5-gallon bucket is better than 3 pieces fighting like chickens in a sack. In a 10-gallon bucket, 2 pieces can do fine if your soil mix is loose and you keep the water right. But here's the interesting part. The hole in the bottom matters more than the size of the bucket. Lord have mercy, I've seen more bucket potatoes ruined by poor drainage than by any bug or disease. Potatoes do not want to sit in sour, wet soil. They'll rot quiet as a secret. You won't know anything's wrong until the leaves yellow and the smell tells the story. So before soil ever touches that bucket, drill drainage holes. Not one little polite hole in the middle. Several holes across the bottom, and I like a few low on the sides too, especially if the bucket sits flat on packed ground. If water can't leave, roots can't breathe. That's not old folklore. Modern growers will tell you the same thing. Potato roots need oxygen in the soil, and wet compacted soil steals it away. Now let's talk soil, because this is where folks make the second big mistake. They go out to the garden, dig up heavy dirt, dump it in a bucket, and wonder why the potatoes come out ugly or few. Garden soil in a bucket doesn't behave like garden soil in the ground. In the ground, water can move sideways and down. In a bucket, everything is trapped in that little world you made. You want a loose mix, not fluffy like cake mix, but open enough that water moves through and roots can breathe. I've had good luck with compost, old leaf mold, a bit of garden soil if it's healthy, and something to loosen it up, like coarse sand or aged pine bark fines. Some folks use potting mix with compost blended in, and that works too, long as it doesn't stay soggy. Don't use fresh manure. I know it feels rich, and old farmers used manure plenty, but fresh manure can burn roots, bring weed seeds, and sometimes encourage scab problems depending on conditions. Well-rotted compost is kinder. Potatoes like steady feeding, not a hard shove. And here's a little clue from the plant itself. If your potato vines grow big and dark and beautiful, but you don't get many potatoes, you may have given them too much nitrogen. They made leaves instead of tubers. That happens. A potato needs enough fertility to build a strong plant, but once it starts setting tubers, balance matters. Too much leafy growth can fool a gardener into thinking everything's perfect until harvest day comes up disappointing. Now, the old bucket trick is not just the bucket, it's timing. That's the part people miss. If you plant one bucket in spring and call it done, you'll get one harvest. But if you plant a few buckets every 2 or 3 weeks during the workable parts of the year, suddenly you've got potatoes coming in waves. That's succession planting, though my people just called it not putting all your eggs in one basket. In colder mountain places, you can start your first buckets earlier than garden rows because buckets warm faster. Set them near a sunny wall, on a porch, or beside a shed where they get gentle warmth. If frost threatens, move them under cover or throw a breathable cloth over them. Don't use plastic directly on leaves unless you keep it from touching, because frost can still bite right through where plastic rests on the plant. In hot summer, the trick changes. A bucket can get too hot. Black plastic in July sun can cook roots. Potatoes are cool season plants at heart. They'll tolerate some warmth, but when soil gets too hot, tuber formation suffers. Experienced gardeners often observe that potatoes do better when the root zone stays cooler, even if the tops get sun. So in summer, you don't treat the bucket like a spring bucket. You move it where it gets morning sun and afternoon shade. You mulch the top. You can wrap the bucket with burlap or set it inside a second container to shade the sides. I've even seen folks nest a bucket inside a wooden crate with straw around it. That ain't decoration. That's root protection. But don't run off yet, because the real nearly year-round part comes from matching the bucket to the season. Spring buckets sit warm, summer buckets sit shaded. Fall buckets chase sunlight again. Winter buckets, if your winters freeze hard, need protection. That might be an unheated greenhouse, a sunny enclosed porch, a cold frame, a shed window, or even just planting late enough that you're storing potatoes in the soil like bucket until you're ready. Now I want to be clear. If your ground freezes solid and your buckets freeze solid too, those potatoes are not growing. They're waiting, or they're damaged if the freeze is hard enough. Nearly all year round doesn't mean magic. It means you can stretch the growing and harvesting season by moving the plant through little pockets of better weather. That's the old Appalachian trick. We didn't control the mountain. We worked around it. Let's talk seed potatoes. You can use certified seed potatoes if you can get them, and that's the safest way because they're inspected for disease. Store potatoes from the grocery can sprout, but many are treated to slow sprouting, and they can carry problems you don't want in your soil. I won't tell you nobody ever used them. Folks have. But if you're building a reliable bucket system, start clean when possible. Cut larger seed potatoes into chunks with at least 1 or 2 good eyes on each piece. Let the cut sides cure for a day or two somewhere cool and airy, not baking in the sun. That little drying helps reduce rot. If the seed potato is small, plant it whole. A strong seed piece gives the plant enough stored energy to get going before roots take over. Some folks like to chit potatoes, which just means letting them sprout a little before planting. Set them in light, cool conditions until the sprouts are short and sturdy. You don't want long, pale noodles breaking off in your hand. Short, greenish sprouts are better. Researchers and growers have long recognized that pre-sprouting can help potatoes get a quicker start, especially in cool seasons. Now when you plant in the bucket, don't fill it to the brim at first. Put maybe 4 to 6 inches of soil mix in the bottom, lay your seed pieces in with the eyes facing up if you can tell, and cover them with a few inches of mix. Then water gently. As the plant grows, add more mix around the stems, leaving some leaves above the surface. Folks call that hilling, even in a bucket. It helps protect developing tubers from light and gives the plant a better covered stem zone. But let me tell you something people misunderstand. Hilling does not always mean endless potatoes all the way up a tall tower. Some internet pictures make it look like you can grow a barrel packed from bottom to top. Most common potato varieties don't behave that way. Potatoes form tubers along underground stems, but variety matters, timing matters, and plant health matters. If you keep burying the plant too deep too fast, you can stress it. Add soil gradually. Let it breathe. Let it grow. And never let tubers see sunlight. That green color on potatoes is a warning sign. Green potatoes can contain higher levels of solanine and related compounds, and you don't want to eat them. A little green skin should be cut away heavily, or, safer yet, discarded if it's significant. In my house, green potatoes went to the compost where animals couldn't get them, not into the skillet. Watering is where the bucket either blesses you or humbles you. Potatoes like steady moisture, especially once tubers begin forming. Not swampy, not bone dry. Steady, stick your finger down into the mix. If the top inch is dry but it's still moist below, wait. If it's dry deeper down, water until you see some drain out the bottom. That tells you the whole bucket got a drink. But don't leave it sitting in a saucer of water. That's asking for rot. One old sign I watch is the leaves in the morning. If they're perky at sunrise, the plant probably recovered overnight. If they're drooping early before the heat comes on, it may be thirsty or root stressed. Afternoon wilt on a hot day doesn't always mean water. Sometimes it means heat. If you drown a heat-stressed potato, you can make things worse. Now, around midsummer, when the heat gets mean, this bucket trick shines. In the ground, your potato row is stuck wherever you planted it. In a bucket, you can move the whole patch. Morning sun, afternoon shade, under the edge of an apple tree, beside a barn where the western sun can't beat it to death. That kind of small adjustment can keep a plant alive and producing when a regular row gives up. And if you've got family ways of growing potatoes or some old trick your grandmother or neighbor used, I'd surely like to hear it down in the comments. Every hollow had its own way of doing things, and sometimes the best garden wisdom is hiding in somebody's memory, just waiting to be spoken again. Now let me tell you how to plan it through the year, because this is the part that turns a few buckets into a steady supply. In early spring, start a small batch as soon as you can protect them from frost. Don't plant every bucket you own. Plant 2 or 3. A couple weeks later, plant 2 or 3 more. If the first batch gets hit by cold, you haven't lost everything. If the weather turns kind, you've got an early harvest and a second one coming behind it. Late spring is your strong planting window in many places. The soil is warming, the days are longer, and potatoes grow fast. This is when buckets can produce beautifully if drainage and watering are right. Keep adding soil as stems grow. Keep the top mulched. And don't let the buckets dry out during tuber formation. When summer heat arrives, shift your strategy. Choose quicker maturing varieties if you can. Look for early or mid-season types instead of long-season storage potatoes. Plant fewer buckets. Keep them cooler, and don't expect them to behave like they did in April. Summer potatoes are about survival and timing. In some hot climates, you may pause during the worst heat and start again later. That's not failure. That's listening. Then comes late summer into fall, and that can be a fine potato season. The trick is counting backward from your first expected hard frost. If a variety needs 70 to 90 days, don't plant it 40 days before freeze and expect a miracle. But buckets can help because you can move them under protection when cold nights come. Even a few extra weeks can make the difference between tiny potatoes and a decent little harvest. For winter, there are 2 ways to think. One is true growing under protection, where the plant still gets enough light and temperatures stay above freezing most of the time. The other is storage in place, where mature or nearly mature potatoes stay in the bucket, covered and cool, until you harvest them. That second method is mighty useful. A bucket full of finished potatoes can be kept in a cool, protected place as long as it doesn't freeze hard and doesn't stay wet. Don't wash potatoes before storing them. Brush off loose soil after they dry a bit. Washing adds moisture, and moisture invites trouble. Cure them in a dark, well-ventilated place if you can, around cool room temperatures for a short while, then store them cooler and dark. Light makes them grain. Warmth makes them sprout. Dampness makes them rot. Now, if you want to harvest new potatoes, you don't have to wait until the whole plant dies back. Once the plant flowers, or once it has grown strong for a while, you can gently feel around in the bucket for small potatoes. Not every variety flowers reliably, so don't use flowers as your only clock. Sometimes I watch the age of the plant and the fullness of the vines. You can ease 1 or 2 small potatoes out and let the plant keep going. That's another bucket advantage. You can tip the bucket slightly, reach gently, and harvest a meal without tearing up a whole row. Be kind about it. Roots don't like rough hands. For full-size potatoes, wait until the tops begin to yellow and die back. Then, stop watering for a bit so the skins can firm up. After a week or 2, dump the bucket onto a tarp and gather them. There's something joyful about that part. No fork stabbing potatoes. No digging through rocks. Just soil rolling open and little treasures showing themselves. But if the plant dies early, don't assume harvest time. Early yellowing can mean too much water, too little water, heat stress, nutrient problems, or disease. Look close. Smell the soil. Check drainage. A gardener who pays attention becomes harder to fool. Let's talk pests. Potato beetles can find bucket plants just like they find rows. Check the undersides of leaves. Eggs often show up there in clusters. Hand-picking works in a small bucket garden. Drop beetles and larvae into soapy water. It's not glamorous, but it works. Mulch can help moisture, but don't let it become a hiding place for rot and slugs. If you see disease on leaves, don't compost sick foliage unless you know your compost gets hot enough. Remove it and keep things clean. Buckets can reduce some soil disease issues because you control the mix, but they don't make plants invincible. Airflow matters. Don't crowd buckets so tight the leaves stay wet all day. Now, one of the best little tricks I know is rotating the bucket soil. Don't keep planting potatoes in the same used mix over and over without refreshing it. Potatoes are in the nightshade family, same as tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. Some diseases can build when you repeat the same family in the same soil. In buckets, it's easier to manage. After harvest, use that old mix around ornamentals or non-nightshade crops if it looks healthy. And start potatoes with refreshed mix. You can add compost, but don't turn the bucket into pure compost. Pure compost can hold too much water and may be too rich. Balance is the word. Loose, fertile, well-drained, steady. Now, here's something I wish more folks understood. The bucket is not just a container. It's a season extender. That's why this trick works nearly all year. You're using the bucket like a movable patch of earth. In March, it sits in warmth. In July, it hides from heat. In October, it chases sun. In December, it rests under shelter. Same plant, same bucket, different decisions. That's what old mountain people were good at, not forcing nature. Reading it. The south side of a building can be several degrees warmer than an open yard. A low spot can frost sooner than a slope. A porch roof can save a plant from cold rain. A wooden barn wall can hold the day's warmth into evening. These little differences don't sound like much, but plants live in little differences. Modern horticulture calls these microclimates. My grandmother called it, put it where it acts right. If you live in a warm climate, your nearly year-round rhythm may look different. You might grow potatoes through fall, winter, and spring, then rest during the hottest part of summer. If you live in a cold climate, you may push spring early, extend fall late, and use protected spaces for winter experiments. The bucket adapts. That's the beauty of it. But don't chase perfection. Some buckets will disappoint you. Some will surprise you. One year the red potatoes may do better. Another year the Yukon types might shine. Keep notes if you can. Nothing fancy, just planting date, variety, weather, and harvest. After 2 or 3 seasons, you'll know more about your place than any chart can tell you. I've had buckets I thought were failures give me enough potatoes for supper. I've had buckets with beautiful vines give me almost nothing. That'll humble a person. But every bucket teaches. Too wet, too hot, too crowded, too rich, too late. The plant tells the truth eventually. If I had to boil the whole trick down, I'd say this: use a roomy bucket with good drainage. Fill it with loose living soil. Plant clean seed potatoes in small batches. Hill gently. Keep moisture steady. Move the bucket with the season. Shade the roots in heat. Protect the tops from frost. Harvest when the plant tells you it's ready. That doesn't sound flashy, does it? But good gardening rarely does. Most of it is simple things done at the right time. And there's something else too. Growing potatoes in buckets brings the garden closer. A person with a small yard can do it. A renter can do it. Somebody with poor soil can do it. An older gardener who doesn't want to dig long rows can still grow a little food. That matters. Food should not belong only to folks with perfect land and big equipment. A bucket of potatoes on a porch is still a garden. Don't let anybody tell you different. When you dump that first bucket and see those potatoes roll out, you'll understand why this old trick stayed around. It feels like finding something the earth hid just for you. And maybe that's part of why I love potatoes. They don't show off. Tomatoes hang red and proud. Beans climb and wave. Corn stands tall. But potatoes work underground, quiet, patient, unseen. A lot of life is like that. So try it this year. Not with 20 buckets at first. Start with 2 or 3. Learn your watering. Learn your sunlight. Learn how fast your mix dries out. Then stagger another batch. And another. Before long, you may find there's hardly a season when you don't have potatoes growing, curing, storing, or waiting in some quiet corner. Nearly all year round doesn't come from forcing one plant to do the impossible. It comes from keeping the cycle moving. That's the old Appalachian way. You don't ask one season to feed you forever. You learn how each season gives, and you meet it halfway. Well, I hope this helps you look at a plain old bucket a little differently. There's wisdom in simple things, if we slow down enough to notice. Take care of your soil. Keep an eye on the weather. Don't waste what nature offers. And when the mountains or your own backyard leave you a clue, pay attention. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep your hands in the dirt, keep respect for the land, and have yourself a peaceful evening from these old Appalachian hills.